Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Mean Green Game Day. I'm your host, Armando Berry, and we've got the best cast with us here today. Rachel Dickens, Connor Hibbett, Justin Ballou, and we're going to get into some of this UNT basketball. UNT basketball season is over. Basketball season is actually coming to a close pretty soon with the end of the NCAA tournament. But looking back at our women's season from the beginning, 7-4 in those first 2 months with our non-conference schedule. Bit of a real rough skid, going 2-5 in the month of January, but then rebounded and really finishing the rest of the regular season for the year up pretty well on a high note after going 8-2 this year. Justin, what were some of the biggest games of the year to you?
Well, I thought we talked about on the show that all the things that kind of went against them at the start of the year with the COVID cancellations that led to a lot of lengthy breaks in their play. They went 12 days without playing, then they went 11 days without playing, and then that ended up making them play some lengthy road trips with three games in 5 days and all things like that. So I think the stuff that went wrong at the start of the season was no fault of their own, and that just kind of put them in this cycle this season where they were just trying to get their feet under them, I think. But towards the end of the season, we kind of saw them come together, win some games there, get into a postseason for the first time in 20 years, so really impressive there. So I just thought, the stuff that went on at the start of the season wasn't really their fault, but it kind of put them behind the 8 ball moving forward this year.
I thought February 10th against Rice, it was a Thursday night home game. I thought that was the game where mentality really changed for them. It was February 5th that they started that winning streak of theirs, and then February 10th they won their second game in a row. They would end up winning 9 of their next 10 games. Very impressive, but the mentality of the team changed. I remember it was early fourth quarter, Rice had made like an 8-0 run, UNT called timeout. Rice could not miss in that game. But what happened was the UNT defense was able to collectively come together as a team, get the stops they needed to down the stretch, and then transition that into offense. And they were able to, I didn't think they had the maybe necessarily the best half-court offense, but they transitioned from their defense, and they were able to kind of stop Rice's run and then capitalize at the end and come out with a close 7-point victory. I thought that was a turnaround for their game. I mean, there were a ton of great games. I thought Old Dominion winning in the conference tournament was awesome. That was their first conference tournament victory in a few years since the pre-COVID days. But I thought that Rice game, February 10th, was the real turnaround, the mentality change.
See, I thought it was earlier. I think February 5th is when things changed. We went 9-3 after that. Our losses were to the top team in the West, which was La Tech. Our other losses to Charlotte, and we ended up losing in the WNIT. But I still think that's an impressive thing. I mean, it's an impressive season for the women. They got their third bid in the WNIT in school history. They won 10 games, which is back-to-back seasons for school history. They have 17 wins, which is 5th in school history. They got a double bye in the conference tournament, which hasn't happened in a long time. I mean, Noble and Townley both getting named to postseason the first time in Conference USA, them being named in the same season, and then Gomez being named in the all-tournament team. They finished with a net ranking of 100, which I think that's not too bad for them. And 16 regular season wins is the best they've done since 2018 and 2019 when they had Terry L. Bradley, who was probably one of the best players in a long time to come to UNT. So it's a very impressive team overall. I got to give it to them. I didn't think they would be able to pull it out, but I think Gomez definitely did a huge number for this team, and the impact she made was very big for that.
And it was also the first time ever that men's and women's basketball made the postseason the same year, so I thought that was really big. But the game I think that stands out was that that first tournament game versus Old Dominion, because if you go back and watch that game, that was a crazy game. I mean, that was hard fought the entire game on both sides. Ali Gomez, you said, hit 6 3-pointers in that game, just went crazy. That, I mean, to win a tournament game for the first time, 2018. For the first time since 2018, 2019, I think, was really impressive. And that win, I think, got them into the women's NIT tournament. I don't think they would have been there without that win. So you get to the semifinal, they put up a really good fight against Charlotte, even though they lost that game. But I thought that Old Dominion win, they showed a lot of grit in that game for sure.
And we talked about. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's a really good point, Justin. But I'm going to agree with Connor on this one, that I think that home game against Rice was when really the gear really started to get rolling. And we really saw the team that we ended up performing for the rest of the year. They went on that. They got the Rice win at home, and then they went 6-0, and then they had a sprinkle of a couple more losses. But I think that win just really got them in gear, and you saw the team that we saw in the rest of the year that really just sparked a real historic run. And having the women's team in the postseason was really great.
My favorite thing watching college basketball is in the closing months and closing weeks, you can see who's playing at a different level. And typically those teams that play well in February and early March, they'll have deeper runs in their conference and postseason tournaments. And we saw that with UNT. They really changed after that Rice game. But something I wanted to point out, it's always easier talking in hindsight, but UNT was actually one of the hottest teams, at least in the group of 5, when you look at postseason play and late regular season play. The only loss in the last month and a half of the season was on the road against Louisiana Tech, who was also one of the hottest teams, probably the hottest team in the conference. And of course, Charlotte was the most consistent team. And then you look, our only loss so we lost to Louisiana Tech on the road, and then we lost to Charlotte by 3 points. And Charlotte was up by 15 in that game, and we came all the way from behind and tied them in the fourth quarter. So really, it's easier to talk in hindsight, but UNT was playing some of the best basketball really in the group of 5 across the country.
And in hindsight, how big was that win over Southern Miss? Because if they hadn't won that game, they were looking at a 3 seed in the tournament, wouldn't have had the double bye, and probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to get to the semifinals. So that was also another big win. They ended up losing that road game against them for the weather delay. That's what it was. So they probably would have lost that road game. So picking up that win, I think it was January 22nd, something around that time, when they beat Southern Miss. That was a huge win to get that double bye ultimately.
So, Justin, with that being said, who, in your opinion, is one of the MVPs for this team?
Well, we talked about MVPs in our last show, and in my opinion, it hasn't changed. It's Ali Gomez. She provided a spark to this team, and she really complimented Quincy Noble really well. That was a huge thing. And you just saw the impact that she makes. I mean, in that tournament, she had the huge game against Old Dominion, and the turning point of that Charlotte game was when she fouled out. She had 15.6 rebounds in that game, and then things, I mean, they were able to kind of come back, but they didn't have the energy that they had when she's on the floor. I mean, she complimented Quincy so well. It just stinks that she was transferring here before her senior season, because we only got her for 1 year, and it looks like she's going to be gone. But I would give it to Gomez. I think Quincy Noble is still, the leader of this team, and she was this year, but Ali Gomez was the X factor, and that's kind of the label I would put on her.
I think that's the best way to put it. I think Quincy Noble is definitely the best player, and I think that she's the type of player that the other team will scout for. But Ali Gomez, I think someone's going to go a little bit more under the rug and really just the heart and soul of the team, who does whatever we need.
Definitely.
I mean, I think Noble definitely. I mean, Gomez definitely did help this year, but I think Noble, her number of accolades are insane. She ended up having 100 points more than anyone else on the team. She ended up with averaging 14.4 points per game. She had 39 steals. She led the team with blocks with 19, which is ridiculous for a girl of her size to lead the team in blocks. That just shouldn't happen. She had 5 games this season with 20 or more points, including a 30-point game this season against a very good team. And honestly, that against Southern Miss, which was the very important game of the season, which definitely led us to getting a good spot in the tournament in that double bye. She's currently 20th on the UNT list for scoring for 789. She's 7th all-time in career three-pointers. She's 8th in career attempts from the three, and this is her 2nd consecutive season being named to a conference tournament, or for a conference all-team, which I guess is a very big thing, because not many of our players have been able to name that. I mean, Bradley was the only one that was able to do in 2018, 2019, with the consecutive years being on that team. But I mean, it's crazy to think what Noble's done, and hopefully Noble stays, and we'll just see what ends up happening next year.
I thought so many times over the course of the season, Gomez kind of took UNT to a different level. I thought so many times the half-court offense would kind of go like
stagnant.
Yeah, exactly. They were stagnant for several minutes. They'd be really, really cold, and the other team would get a run, and then Gomez would hit like some crazy long three-pointer that would kind of get UNT rolling again, and it would kind of get that offense clicking again. So many times she'd bail out the offense, and that, to me, that's the definition of a most valuable player, is that someone who can pull you out of the slump that your team is in and can pull the team back to where they can start clicking as a team. And I think Gomez did that so many times over the course of the season. And what's scary to think about is that she had an injury that kind of set her back for multiple weeks. Had she not had the injury, I wonder what the ceiling could have been for her and the team. But nonetheless, I thought she was the most valuable player for the team this past season.
The difference that Ali Gomez makes kind of reminds me of what Jerez McBride does for the men's team, because when he's playing well and when she's playing well, the offenses just are totally changed. The strategy is different. The potential is different. The ceiling is raised for the offense. So we'll talk about men's in a little bit, but I would compare her to Jerez McBride on the men's side.
I like that comparison. Justin, more from you. What do you think was the best moment that the UNT women's basketball team experienced this season?
Well, I think getting to host a women's NIT game, I know they lost against Tulsa, but that's big. I mean, that gets you on the national stage. I think it was an ESPN Plus game, so gets you some recognition, get to put the logo on the court. And again, I think winning that Old Dominion game is probably what ultimately got them into that tournament. So the Old Dominion win, you come up barely short against Charlotte, but you put up a great fight, and then you get to host a women's NIT game. So I thought that was a strong finish to the season.
And I'm going to go with the Old Dominion Conference Tournament victory. I mean, that was the first time UNT, again, the women's team had won in the postseason or the conference tournament since 2018, 2019. And then, of course, Gomez, she got the offense going. She hit 6 3-pointers in that game, and she hit like 3 threes, like back to back to back. It was absolutely an insane performance from her and the rest of the team, so I'll go with that.
I'm going to go back to earlier in the year. I got to think that November, when they were playing for Thanksgiving, they played in the Cal Valley Classic. They ended up winning. They played Montana State, and they played St. Thomas. Both these teams aren't incredible, but, I mean, you got to look at what they did. They ended up beating Montana State 87-78. Dixon had 26 points, Noble had 21. The team was really led by the rebounds in both of these games, because both of these games ended up having over 40 rebounds, which is a huge thing, and I think that's really because of Townley and what she was able to do. 14 from her in the Montana State game, but in the St. Thomas game, she was very incredible, and I think that this team really at least started off well, and what they were able to do in the end was they started well and they ended well. So that's what I got to say. Making it to the WNIT was huge as well.
I think the postseason play was probably the most important thing from this season. Just it really a lot of times UNT women's basketball has been more on the back burner of UNT basketball, but I feel like beginning the postseason shines them a bigger light just as much as it really cements as a basketball school. But with that, we do have a lot of seniors on the team, and it really there's a lot of concerns of how good can we be with a lot of people departing. Justin, what are your thoughts on the people?
Yeah, so you have Ali Gomez, Amber Dixon, and Madison Townley as your 3 seniors, and we just got the news today that Jayzion Jackson is going to be transferring. So the starting lineup's going to look a bit different next year. I think Ali Gomez is obviously the biggest loss out of that group. Kendall McGruger, we're big fans of her on this show. She averaged 3.5 points a game this year off the bench. Expect her to probably step up into a starting role next year, as well as Tamisha Lampkin at that 5 spot. I think she has an ideal body to play 5 over someone like Madison Townley, who a lot of the time would kind of get out-bodied down in the paint. And then you'll have Mallard. So your lineup's looking like Quincy Noble, Kendall McGruger, Tamisha Lampkin, Jalen Mallard, and then possibly Chloe Callahan stepping into maybe a starting role next year. The seniors are going to hurt, but I don't think they're going to be hurt with the loss of Townley and Mallard, because I think Jaylee Mitchell knows how to play her forwards, and I think Lampkin will take over that spot. So starting lineup's going to look different. It's nice to have Quincy Noble back though at least next year.
And the depth's going to be hurt as well. There's a few players that came off the bench. They didn't score a whole lot, but they did have several minutes per game, and we're also going to be losing those kinds of players. We're also going to be losing multiple players off the bench, so the depth's going to be hurt. So I think the transfer portal is going to come into play. We're in the day and age of the transfer portal. You can start to build up your roster through that. So I think we really need to look at not just obviously recruiting, but obviously the transfer portal, because there's going to be other players throughout the country that are going to be looking for new destinations to play. So if we can get a couple of those, maybe players that average like 7, 8, 9 points per game, that'd be pretty good for the depth.
I mean, look at what the transfer portal did to the conference. I mean, you had Iggy Allen, had ODU, who was at FAU the year before. You saw the impact she made there, and I mean, it was huge. She was the #1 player, but I mean, it's hard to see that transfer portal won't make a difference, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, though.
We told y'all we needed to see the finished product from the men's team to judge it, and it's here. We'll dive into that next.
Honorary Forest Ranger Betty White here, lending a hand to my dear friend Smokey Bear, because for 75 years, he's only said,
only you can prevent wildfires.
But there's a lot more to say. Like, if you park your car on tall, dry grass, the hot exhaust pipe can start a wildfire. So keep the animals safe, especially the cute shirtless one. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention.
Start a story. Adopt at theshelterpetproject.org.
No. What's this?
Open that. Oh.
Wait, what?
Hey.
Oh, did I not say? It's kitten season. Every spring cats get busy. Too busy. Thousands of kittens end up in shelters who might not make it out alive because there isn't anyone to take care of them, even for a week. You were born to be a cool foster auntie. Kittens are way cuter than babies. No offense. You're a little dirty, but kittens don't judge. Foster a kitten, because it's harder to give a baby back. I've tried.
Around on Mean Green Game Day. For Coach McCaslin and the Mean Green men's basketball team, this year has been another stellar season. Some of the accolades from this year: CUSA regular season champs, most wins in UNT history, most road wins, longest win streak, the first NIT win in history, and the nation's #1 defense in the country. Pretty good year, I say. Justin, what do you think about thoughts on where this season ranks in UNT basketball history?
Well, it's definitely, I think, your most memorable regular season ever because that team was just so dominant. And it's unfortunate how it ended with the postseason, but I would still say, looking back at last year, just given that they went to the round of 32, they win the conference tournament, no one really expected them to win that conference tournament last year too. So I just think with how special last year's postseason run was, that still makes it your best overall season. But, you know, this year was really special, and it was nice to get a win in the NIT at least.
And Justin, I think that this season, I'm with you in, like, I hate to say it, but, like, I'm a little disappointed. I'm a little selfish because, like, I just wanted this team to really go even further than the last year's team did and get to the NCAA tournament and be one of those mid-major schools that surprise people and make the deep run. But when you look at this list, the NIT, the long winning streaks, this is the type of season that's going to attract more players that want to be a part of a great group. So can't be disappointed, but a lot makes you feel.
I mean, when you think about teams like UMBC and Oral Roberts and how about St. Peter's, you remember them for what they do in March. You don't remember how, they were like 30-3 during the regular season. Nobody remembers that. So I think having the postseason performance that we did last year kind of, to me, it has like a different kind of milestone, if you will, for UNT basketball history. So for me, in my opinion, that's the greatest season in UNT men's basketball history. But I definitely think for regular season talk, in terms of being dominant with the statistics, having the best defense in the country with points given up on the average per game, sure, I think this past season was probably the most dominant team UNT's ever had because last year's team had a lot of experience and they were able to come together when it mattered most in back-to-back conference tournament games and then, of course, finding a way to get to the round of 32. Unfortunately, we had to play Villanova. But, I mean, I look back to this past season and I still admire all the success. And let's not forget, this was supposed to be a transition season when we lost like 3, maybe 4 starters from last year's team. And of course, Bell came back, but everybody else was pretty much brand new guys that were going to be fitting into similar roles to how the previous team played. But a lot of new players, and they meshed well together. It took a couple weeks, but then once you got out of November, the team really started clicking. And of course, especially after that early conference loss to UAB at home, it's like nobody could touch UNT after that. Had a couple close victories on the road, but we found a way to be the last remaining undefeated team on the road this past season. We can't forget that. There are so many great things that happened for this past season. So let's not just talk about, but we lost in the postseason. There's a lot of great things that we can also build on for the future with guys like Abu Usman coming back, Tyler Perry, Mr. Clutch coming back, and there's going to be other guys stepping up. And, of course, there's always the transfer portal.
I mean, you got to also look at the postseason. UNT's been involved in 5 years. They ended up winning a CBI game, an NIT game, and an NCAA tournament. They're one of in 5 years. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you're getting your name out there. The recruits are going to hear you, and they're going to clearly see that McCaslin is doing a good job, and even bringing in players and making them fit into a system and figuring out how to work with these players best. I mean, you got to think about the defense. The road wins are incredible. I mean, unfortunately, the loss to UTSA was not the best, but I mean, you got to look at this team throughout the season. I mean, they were hot. They had a 15-game winning streak, and they ended up winning 16 games overall, which is Conference USA history, which has been done multiple times. We had the chance to do 17. We didn't ultimately end up doing that. But I mean, this program as a whole, beating La Tech and UAB this year with Jelly Walker, and you also got to think about Kenneth Lofton Jr. Both of those players being incredible, but being able to stop them on the road and then being able to stop them at home, just very good season overall. You can't take it away from them.
So I think we should focus on the positive. So Justin, what were some of like the best games, or maybe your favorite game in your opinion? So I know you've been at
what Rachel
a
just
couple.
said. Beating La Tech twice in the regular season, obviously losing to them in the tournament, but beating La Tech twice, beating UAB on the road. Tyler Perry really clinched all 3 of those games. He had 2 game winners in the final seconds, and then the dagger to clinch the win over La Tech at home to win the championship. I mean, those games are awesome. And if you go back and watch them, they didn't really play well in any of them. Like they had foul trouble. They struggled from the free throw line as they did all season long. They didn't shoot the 3 ball well really in any of those games, but they found a way to win all of them over 2 really good teams, 3 games, and that just shows like how good this team is, how good Coach McCaslin is, and how special things are going to be for the future. So I'm very happy with those wins, and then obviously getting Virginia at home. I know they lost the game, but that was big. I mean, getting an ACC team, 2019 national champions up in your building. I mean, that's something special, and that's another thing that will get UNT's name out there. Playing on ESPN against Virginia is great.
I can't say how many times this past season UNT found ways to either win games they never should have, or had a slight chance to win games that they ended up losing, but should have never even had a shot to even come close in. Like Virginia, just a few nights ago. We were down by 10, and we found a way to tie that game and go into overtime. And then against Louisiana Tech, we had 29 points with like 8 minutes to go, and yet we were only down by like 5 or 6 at that time. And then with 1:40 to go, McBride barely missed a floater that would have cut it to 1, and yet we had only had 32 points with 1.5 minutes to go, and yet we'd only given up 35 points. That says about the character and the attitude about UNT men's basketball team. They're able to keep fighting no matter how the game's going, and they're able to find ways to stay in games. What about the UTEP game? UNT never even had the lead in that game, and yet they ended up only losing by 2 despite being down by 10 and 13 points multiple times over the course of that second half. So many times they just found ways to, and then of course, like Justin said, they were able to also win some games that they never should have against both UAB and La Tech on the road, had heavy deficits in both of those games, or large deficits in both of those games. The ability for this team just to be scrappy and have success in times that they just were not made to is just incredible.
And the Texas State game in the NIT too. They didn't play well in that game either, and found a way to get a win.
And they were down by 7 with 1:04 to go.
I was gonna say with that Virginia game, Reuben Jones wasn't even playing, and they came back into overtime, and they would just play a little bit better defense. Virginia hit 3 threes, and it just got too far for them. But if they would play a little better defense, they would have been into, I think it was like the semifinal round in that. So gotta be.
They would have been hosting too, since Oklahoma had lost. So disappointing, but
Rachel, who's your MVP for the season?
I gotta go with Thomas Bell. He's a 5-year team. He's honestly been there all year, and I gotta give it to him. I mean, yes, you have Tyler Perry, but Bell was also there in those big moments too. He ended up with 2 accolades. He ended up on the all defensive team, and he ended up on the second team conference. He ended his season as well as I think he could have. I don't think he could have expected anything better from Bell and this team, and I think Bell ultimately led players to be better. Like Usman, I don't think Usman would be the player he is without Bell being here, and I don't think Perry would be either. So I think you got to give it to McCaslin for keeping him here and convincing people to stay, like JJ and him. But I really think he had a fabulous year, and I think he's going to have do great whatever he is going to end up doing in the future.
Tyler Perry was probably one of the best closers in the whole entire country. When I think about the regular season success, I think about those late shots against La Tech and UAB. I'll go with TP. To me, he's just been incredible the whole season, really.
Where would UNT have been without Tyler Perry? I mean, he was the only good free throw shooter, reliable free throw shooter on this team.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't have won those games against UAB and La Tech, any of those 3. And it would have put a ton of more pressure on their starting guards, specifically J.J. Murray, who's we've talked about being sort of a liability on offense. So I just think, last year we had Javian Hamlet, and he just kind of passed the torch on now to Tyler Perry. You go from one legend to your future legend and your future guy who's going to be here for hopefully 3 or 2 more years now. So, I mean, Tyler Perry has to be the MVP, and now next year we're going to see him in a starting role, maybe running point. Ruben may do that, but he'll be in a starting role next year, playing a ton of minutes as he did this year. So very excited for him in the future.
Absolutely. With Tyler Perry leading the way at the guard position, I think it just makes everything exciting. There's so much you could do pairing with him wise with people in the transfer portal. If I had to give out a most improved player award, I'd want to give it to Abu Usman, going from where he was last year to now being he could be a focal point in the offense to get some points. But now let's look ahead to the future. It was a little bit nerve-wracking to look to the future now with where Coach McCaslin was going to go, but now the news broke that he's going to be staying with UNT. What do you guys think about that?
He was never leaving. I know Coach McCaslin pretty well personally. I talked to him before a lot of the games at practices, and I don't get the sense that he wanted out. And they talked about LSU, SMU being a possible destination. LSU hired Murray State's Matt McMahon. I think that's how you say his name. And then SMU is going to go elsewhere. I mean, SMU would have doubled his salary, but I just don't think with the fan base that's building here, everyone's getting excited with the recruits that he's been able to bring in, going out and getting someone like Tyler Perry, getting Thomas Bell to stay this last year, getting his guys to stay. I mean, I just don't think, I never got the sense that he was on his way out. And I know that he could have made more money elsewhere, but I think he wants to be here. And, that's just been my opinion from the start. I didn't think he was going anywhere no matter how good UNT was this year.
The future of UNT basketball looks fantastic. We're having a dynasty on the court with McCaslin and the players, and we're having a dynasty off the court with the maniacs with the student section. It just looks insane everywhere you look inside that Coliseum. I'm really excited for the future. So you mentioned Abu Usman. He was one of the more, not just the most improved player for UNT, but one of the more improved players in the whole entire conference. Absolutely. Then you got a guy like Tyler Perry. You got a guy like Reuben Jones. Again, who knows who we could get from the transfer portal. There's a lot to be excited for the future. We got Matthew Stone. He's a really good spot shooter as well. He didn't shoot a whole lot, but he ended up scoring in the last game. I was excited to see that. Everybody was going crazy. Again, the maniacs. But I'm really excited for the future of UNT basketball, and we are now we are a basketball school, and now everybody is starting to know us. Like even the last Saturday home game against Louisiana Tech, everybody was saying this is the place to be.
The one thing I would say about recruiting is, on the women's side, Jaylee Mitchell has been able to bring a lot of girls home that are from DFW. Coach McCaslin really recruits well all over the country. Like Tyler Perry, I don't remember exactly where he was from, but he was a JUCO product out of, where is it? Oklahoma. Okay, so he's been able to recruit well outside of the state, whereas Jaylee Mitchell has really just gone after girls that are from the DFW area. So that's really impressive and something to watch for the future too.
I never noticed that until you said that, because Javon Hamill was from Memphis and things like that.
Right.
But now let's focus on the seniors leaving. We do have Thomas Bell. I think he's going to be someone that we're going to miss because we do have we got guards locked up with Tyler Perry, hopefully Marjaz McBride, Reuben Jones coming up, Abu Usman at the big man position. But I think we're going to miss having that versatile 3-and-D forward, and we're going to need someone to step up in that role and kind of fit that with some athletic capabilities. What do y'all think about what type of role, what type of players and what their roles would be moving forward?
So I think Aaron Scott's going to move up and be more of a Bell, and you're going to see him be more of a starter. He's going to end up getting more time. He's going to get stronger this offseason. He's going to get a little more powerful on the defense. He's going to be able to shoot and be able to make those tough shots, kind of like Usman's been able to do this year. And I really think Matthew Stone has a capability. I mean, his three-point is excellent. I want him to expand his game, be more aggressive, but smart aggressive, and the fact that he's not going to get fouled. And he's going to get more of a primary position in this team. I don't know if it's going to be starting, but he could be coming off the bench, kind of like Perry was this season. So it'd be interesting to see what they've got within the team, and then transfers, obviously.
This is what I would say about the seniors. The fans, everyone loves this group of seniors, but I think what I love more about UNT basketball is that every single year they find a way to just refuel instead of rebuild, and that's what we see all these big programs do is no matter who the players are, they're going to play well, especially within this scheme that's so defensive-minded and slow-paced. Really, any of these guys, Matthew Stone's going to be really exciting. Really, any of these guys, I think, with how UNT plays their style of basketball, we're going to be fine for the future. We still don't know about Drez McBride, but he may be on his way out as well. He may have an extra COVID year that he might take, but definitely J.J. Murray's going to hurt just with what he does on defense. And, Thomas Bell, Aaron Scott will step into that role, but as Rachel said, he definitely needs to get stronger and maybe even a little taller to kind of replace what Bell did this year.
And losing guys like Thomas Bell and J.J. Murray, it's gonna really hurt on the defensive end. However, on the contrary, the offensive side is gonna probably improve with guys like Stone and Aaron Scott. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this offense can do and kind of pick up the pace, because so many times this past season, kind of like the women's team, we go stagnant for like 5, 6, 7 minutes. And while I love the defense, believe me, being number one in the country in points given up is awesome. But the offense could also improve, and I think that will improve a lot next year.
Alrighty, guys, that concludes this episode, our last episode of Mean Green Game Day. Thank you so much for watching us all season, and thank you to our cast and crew, especially Rachel Dickens, who is a graduating senior and has been on Mean Green Game Day for the past 2 semesters. Thank you. Make sure you guys tune in next season, and until then, we'll see you next time.
When I first saw Turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with Turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he